That's right. This was the first military science building. Okay, it was built in 1911 for the first gymnasium also, but also for the military science building. But we're well. Let's let's re let's rewind back to 1862. Um, can anyone tell me the significance of that year? What was going on during that time?
The year again?
1862.
That was when the Land Grant Act was passed, wasn't
It
it?
was before the university was officially a university.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. The Morrill Act of 1862 was passed. It was passed to promote education of all social classes, and that also excludes African Americans, though. But that would later be changed in 1890 when it would move more towards Confederate states. But they wanted to open more schools to emphasize agriculture, engineering, and military science due to a particular revolution that was going on at this time. Can anyone name that revolution?
1863, American Civil War, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
Was the Industrial Revolution?
You got it right there. The second industrial revolution was going on. Okay, and can anyone tell me what industrial revolution is? It's basically a big boom in technology. I mean, you had the first one with that was about 50 years to 100 years earlier, and then now you have this one. So at this time, all over the world, you have a lot of technologies, and life is getting easier. It's war is getting more complicated, and so now you know that that's going on at the time. Why would the U.S. government care about promoting education in states, in less populated states like Kansas, not even Kansas at the time, but in this territory, in this Indian territory? Anyone think of a reason why? Yeah.
With the advance of urbanization, more people are moving from rural settings into urban settings. So there's less people do the farming. So they want to develop the production methods of agriculture, so you can have less farmers and more output to feed those in the urban areas.
They wanted a couple reasons. They wanted to have better farmers. They wanted to have more educated and use the land better, because at this time land was huge. The government was giving land grants like crazy, just to anybody. That was a big profit deal for the government. And okay, so the Morrill Act gave 30,000 acres of land to each state, per state legislator and senator. So each state, so each one that they had of those of each state, they would give 30,000 acres for that for each state. So so now Kansas had all this land for that, and Kansas State, you have Kansas State University later on. It was the Kansas State Agricultural College. It was passed in 1862. I'm sorry, February 14th, 1863, and it was later opened in September 2nd, 1863. Can anyone tell me what was going on between February 14th and September 2nd? Yeah. The Battle of Gettysburg. So while this school was being built and while it was passed, you had war going on. So they wanted officers, they wanted Army soldiers to get going over there in battle. So you have that. That now it brings us to more recent times. So the war's over. There's now ROTC on this new college, and we're now in this building. While cadets were learning to be officers at this school, little fun fact, they did their summer field training over in Fort Riley, That's very surprising. I thought that was a really interesting fact. And it was only summer long. So, okay, so moving on, just a little history of this building. In 1950, Ahern was built that replaced this gymnasium, and so for a while, this building just was empty. It wasn't really used that much. And later, can anyone tell me what happened in 1968?
The students revolted because of the war.
Well, that was a possible deal. That wasn't for sure. But you're right. What did they do?
They burned down the building.
You're right. And can anyone tell me, besides him, what was left from the building that they found?
The Wabash.
You got it. Yeah, that's why we play the Wabash. Okay. Yeah. So that happened in 1968. And the early 80s, they rebuilt this building. Actually, the building itself was still up just because it was limestone, but they remodeled it inside.
Or it started being built in 1922. Can anyone tell me why it was named Memorial Stadium?
Not on your sheet.
Memorial to the guys in World War II.
Perfect. Right on. Yep. It was started built in 1922, and then it was actually completed in 1929. They built it in two sections. This west end was built 1922. The east end was built in 1924. Since then, they've held numerous pass and reviews for ROTC, as well as different commissioning ceremonies to present the new second lieutenants to the parents and families. Let's see. Multiple drill operations have gone on in here, and let's see. Oh, can anyone tell me what that wood frame is in the detachment on the second floor? Do you know what that is? Anyone? Has a bunch of pictures of old soldiers. No one?
Each one?
First floor, right.
They're all pictures of
Right.
people who died.
Right. That actually used to be here at Memorial Stadium. It's since moved to the detachment, so I thought that was interesting. I didn't know anything about that, so I'll have to definitely check that out at some point. Let's see, what else does it have here? Interesting fact I thought was during World War I and World War II, they actually did not have enough pilots, or sorry, not pilots, officers to go train the cadets. So what they would do is the 400s would step up and actually train the cadets. They would actually sign paperwork as a second lieutenant, and then once they commissioned, they got their bars, and then they went right off to war. So it was definitely done a little bit differently back then. Let's see, we've played football here since, well, before 1967 we've played football here, and the record attendance here is actually 23,000. Can you believe that at all? 23,000 people in here? I thought that was pretty crazy. A big patch for sure. That's about all I have. This is retired Colonel Fryer. He was a detachment PMC here. PAS,
Yeah.
excuse me. And
And I was here almost in the dark ages. It was 30 years ago. I was here in 1981 through 1984. So when I came, the size of the number of cadets in the program was roughly the same number that it is now. As far as the staff and cadre, we had one more officer. We had 4 officers, so each one of us had, like I taught the AS-400s and on down through the AS-100s. And then, so there's 4 officers, there was 2 NCOs, and then there was a civilian secretary that they had then too. So, let's see, I've got a couple in the back. How many of you you've been to summer camp before, right?
Yes, sir.
And of course, you didn't have any choice where you went. Everybody goes to Maxwell these days, right?
Yes, sir.
In my era, 30 years ago, we had summer camps spread out at bases pretty much around the United States, and it kind of depended what your academic major was. So myself, I went to and do they still have like a 4-week and a 6-week camp?
Only 4 weeks, sir.
Only the 4, okay, because in my day they did have the 2-year program too. But anyway, I went to, first year I went to McConnell. I was commandant of cadets at McConnell, and then my second year I went out to Vandenberg, and that was primarily if you were a technology major and wanted to get in the missile career field then. So again, summer camps are different. How many want to be pilots? Okay. In those days, if you had a pilot slot, you went through here on campus what was called FIP, the Flight Indoctrination Program. I was the only rated officer, so I taught the ground school, and then you actually went out to the Manhattan Airport and had civilian instructors out there. And I can't remember how many hours I don't think you got your private pilot's license, but again, one difference there as well. So some of you wearing the, I see at least one, there's 2 of you, Arnold Air. If 30 years ago, you would have been doing, in the fall, Sunday mornings after home games, you know what you would have been doing?
Cleaning.
Cleaning what?
Stadium.
They had stadium clean. Now, you don't do that anymore, right?
We've done it last year and the years before, but this year we decided to do concession stands at the stadium.
Okay. You had the whole stadium to clean then?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It wasn't just Arnold Air Society. It was the whole cadet wing.
Okay. But it was a good fun. How much did you earn per game? Do you remember?
It's about 3,000, sir.
Really? Yeah. I mean, a good fundraiser and all that.
Yes, sir.
But in those days, see, the year I'm talking about was pre-Bill Snyder, because he didn't come to the late 80s. So, I mean, you know, the stadium was much smaller. I mean, the only time they ever sold out was Nebraska, and of course, better than half the stadium was red anyway. So anyway, that was a change. So I was telling the NCOs, you know, of course, they've got the desktop computers there and all that. In my era, desktops were just coming on board, so all the paperwork and all that went back and forth was all done. Typewriters, which is kind of a thing of the past, and we used bills. Let me talk a little bit about Arnold Air, though, because it was very strong in those days. I didn't realize at the time, but my first year here, we were actually the area headquarters, and I had some title as far since we were area headquarters. And we had a bunch of us that went to NatCon that year, and that was, if you ever get a chance to do that, the year I went down, it was down in Memphis, and I'd been down there on the Mississippi River. What was it? The historic Peabody Hotel with their ducks, which, if you don't know about that, that's a different story. Anybody ever heard of Angel Flight?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you would not have been in the program in those days, or in the late 70s anyway, you know, before women started coming on board. But we had a very strong, it wasn't an auxiliary of ROTC, but there were a lot of sorority members that were in Angel Flight, and they did an awful lot of service projects too. So, again, something that was different. So. Okay, turning to famous alums, grads, generals. Who can name me a general that went through the program?
General Keys.
General Keys, and I understand he's going to be here this year, so get an opportunity. He's got some great stories to tell. Who else?
General Myers.
General Richard Myers. Anybody ever seen that book before? Especially you pilot candidates, you ought to read it. It's a great read. Got a chapter early on about his days here at K-State. A little bit about Aggieville. His wife actually grew up here in Manhattan too. So. Anybody else? Any other generals come to mind? I've only got one other one to share, and that would be a one-star by the name of General Jim Latham. And he graduated. Keys and Myers graduated in the 60s. I think Latham was later on, probably in the 70s. But one of the heritage that we have, okay, everybody, how many of you have seen the Thunderbirds get one of their performances? Okay, just pretty much everybody. We have one grad from this school that was Thunderbird League, and that was this General Latham. He was, my first year here, fall of '81, the Thunderbirds were flying the T-38, and they were training out at their home in Las Vegas, and all 4 of them, the Diamond, they were trying to do they were in a loop formation and did not pull enough G's coming back through, and all 4 of them crashed and were killed. And of course the Air Force immediately canceled the season, not only in '81 but '82. When they decided to start back up in '83, they wanted to switch airplanes, and the F-16 was just coming on board, so that's when they first started. And one thing you'll find out, and this is true of life, not just the Air Force, but it pays to be in the right place at the right time. Latham had been a wingman as a captain with the Thunderbirds, so he had that background, which was a requirement to be Thunderbird Lead. He was also a lieutenant colonel, and the squadron commander is a lieutenant colonel. and he was checked out in the F-16. So anyway, he was blessed when they first started back up. He was the Thunderbird lead for a couple of years, I think. There was in that first group. There was also a Kenton who was, I think, right wing at that time, not an ROTC grad. So 2 of the 4 of them anyway were grads. Anything else, or is about time?
I think I've got a minute or so.
Yeah. You notice I didn't mention sports very much, so we talked a little bit about football over here. But anyway, in those early days, sometimes we were lucky to win 1 game, or we were no wins, 10 losses and 1 tie, something like that. Good basketball teams. So Lady Cats were really strong then, as well as the men were there too. How many of you were here? This had been a year and a half ago. When Colonel Meyer was a PAS, so we had the reunion and brought back, okay, so several of you remember that. That's the first time we've ever had a reunion of grads as well as cadre that came back, and both General Myers and General Keys were here for that. In fact, we had, if you look at decades, we had a graduate, I think we had 1 graduate from the 50s, and then 60s all the way through, some recent graduates for that. And the most grads were actually out of the 60s when General Myers, of course, they graduated more than 2 because it was still a mandatory program. Anyway, enough of my spiel. Anybody got any questions?
Amazing how that many men and women fought and died so we could be here today. It's impressive, actually. And it makes you think to yourself, well, now it's my turn. Hence the mirrored tags. Look in there, you see yourself, my turn. In 1863, the Morrill Land Grant was enacted, establishing schools all across the country, mostly in the East, to be able to have military training and create officers. We had a shortage of officers during the Civil War. Pretty much half, if not more, went to the Confederacy because a lot of the service academies back then were in the South, like Virginia, BMI, schools of the sword. K-State was an experimental school, and it obviously worked because we're still here. So technically we were the first, in 1947, whenever the Air Force was founded, or created, I guess. Kansas State Det 270 was also created. The Academy was not here, therefore making us the first sessions group of Air Force officers. That's pretty special. A lot of people don't know that. It's very underplayed, it's downplayed here, it's rather disgusting. That's why this 150th anniversary of Kansas State University is very, very, very important. Yeah, there might be other schools with larger cadet corps or wings like Texas A&M. They were the first. And their stuff only works because it worked here. It's also very important, I feel, here as a cadet at K-State, to understand your roots, especially knowing that the 1st ROTC detachment, battalion, cadet corps, whatever you want to call it. It's very special, very unique, provides something to the universal fight against tyranny. I think we're pretty much done here. Go ahead and take it on back to the detachment, and we're going to try and have our formal retreat.
As many of you, or most of you know, my name is Cadet Simons. Does anyone know what is behind me? Ignore ignore the sign that gives it away to you.
I was going to say.
There's no situational awareness here.
Oh,
That's not there. Does anyone know? All right, I will tell you. It's the Vietnam War Memorial. It was set up in part by Arnold Air Society to commemorate those who lost their lives from Kansas State in that war. If you go up and you look at the names, some of them will have black stars and some of them will have white stars next to them. The black stars are missing in action, and the white stars are missing in action and also killed in action. So just a little bit of information there. Also, if you'll notice the tree off to the back, kind of behind that real thick one, there's a little plaque underneath it. That is a tree in remembrance of Captain Grimm. There's a small memorial inside the detachment. That's also a tree that his family planted. And again, with the Arnold Air Society and their support of this, every time around Veterans Day, they have a 24-hour silent guard with someone posted about right here, just paying tribute to the sacrifices that were made. In the Vietnam era, it was a very trying time for the nation and also for Kansas State. And amongst those trials, Kansas State still had a steady stream of volunteers who were willing to go and fight in the Vietnam War. From 1946 to 1965, it was required for all freshmen and sophomore males to be in ROTC. However, in 1966, that was the first year that that requirement was no longer existed. And so the number of cadets in ROTC dropped from over 1,650 to over 200. And so even amongst the massive drop-off in numbers, Air Force ROTC still commissioned over 240 officers into the Air Force over those next 3 years. Among those were General Myers and General Keyes. So some very important figures in the Air Force's history. At this time, I'll turn it over to Colonel Armbrust, who's just going to share a little bit about his perspective, his
we often, the spouses at that time, I think I've heard you have senior year, you have some coursework or some meetings for the spouses. When I was in ROTC, I think it was actually started in the junior year. Your fiance or spouse, you had to be engaged. They had many classes because back then there were no males or females in ROTC. If you wanted to be involved, you had to be in Angel Flight. And so your spouses, which has made great improvements since then, but your spouses, as the male, were expected to be a major part of your career and support you. So they got a great deal of classwork on what was expected of them. First they learned what was expected of us so that they could understand why these things were expected of them. I've got a strange feeling that today that would go over real well, and it really shouldn't go over real well. But back then, that was the case, and it was true that there were no females in the ROTC program. Okay. Before I go on, do you have any specific questions that you might have either about active duty when I was on or for here? If not, that's fine. I'll just keep talking. I'll tell you that there's life afterwards. I did meet my wife here, and part of it is you had to do reports as we marched. So I was a cadet colonel, so you had, I don't know how many, but a large group of people. And you had to write your reports. But remember, what would you do? You go back and get your laptop or your iPad, right? Pretty simple. Remember, we had typewriters, and you had to have correction tape, and they wanted these reports to be perfect. So I've been telling everybody the reason I married my wife was because she was the one who typed my reports, and I thought that was pretty neat back then, because I probably would have still been here trying to type the report perfectly. One story, I don't know with your with you being here, well, I should tell them this, but we were out marching across the street one day, and I had my group, and a lot of the sorority girls were going by, so I stopped, and we did an eyes right, and we just watched. And I spent the next 2 hours in the office trying to explain why that was part of the training curriculum. We made it, we did fine. We used to be security at basketball games in a HERM. So you had to wear a uniform. And what some of us learned was, again, we had fun. I had fun. I mean, I have fun while you're having it. Don't get me wrong, but some of us would go early and tell them we were part of security, even though we weren't, because the night before we'd stuff our clothes back in a corner someplace. So we'd get in because lines would be forever. So we go, and then we finally walk around and we change clothes and hide out until they open the doors, and we always have front row seats. So, you could use it to your advantage too.
But those, again, that was a tough time to wear your uniform, so you were really pretty careful about even going to those games to be secure at that time. I don't know of a lot of other things, and again, I don't know if you have any questions. Arnold Air was a big deal at that time. I'm sure it still is. Angel Flight is a big deal at that time. Again, Angel Flight was important because there were no females in the Corps, so if they needed to be supportive, that was the way they had to do it. Do you have a question?
Sir, I'm sorry if I missed this, but may I ask what year you were here?
Yeah, 1968 is when I graduated, so
Okay.
my first 2 years were the mandatory, and then you had to make that decision as to whether you wanted to compete, and it was a competition to get into the last 2 years of ROTC. It was actually very competitive. And then the same thing with when you go in, are you still going in as, well, they don't do that anymore. See, we went in as reserve officers. And you had to go through a board to become a regular officer. So when you went through ROTC like that, you basically had, I think it was at about the 2 or 3 year point, you had to go through a board to be regular.
I still did that, but I was one of the last
that?
years. I think it is concurrent with captain now. I think the board is just if you make
Just
captain.
if you make
but
captain.
they may have done away with that distinction altogether.
Yeah, it was, when I was in, it was actually, there were people that were not accepted as regular. It depended on how your performance reports were written. So again, a little different time. I don't know, any other questions about? Let me just tell you this. I think the Air Force is a great career. And it may not be a career for all of you, but I think you will get a lot out of being the leaders that you're trained to be. And it will serve you well when you get out, whether you make it a full career or you spend the minimum amount of time. So enjoy it, but it'll be also very good for you. I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I am the executive director of the Governor's Military Council here in Kansas. So that's a position appointed by the governor, and I work military issues across the state, so Army and Air Force mainly here. We do have some Coast Guardies up in Topeka, and work with the Adjutant General in the state of Kansas a lot. But you couldn't get a job like that if you didn't have some kind of past military experience. It's a great job. So there's life after this, whether you make a full career or not. So I wish you all the very best. Enjoy it, and work hard, and use that training, because leaders, we're starting to miss real leaders. And you can be that. It's a training. So best wishes to you all.